Hello everybody, my name is Riccardo Aversa and I am the first speaker of the proposition team. As proposition team, we support the following motion. So, this house prefers fair trade products over zero distance products. Before showing you our team line, I would like to give you some of the definitions of this topic. So, we have found three definitions. First of all, we have defined prefers, which means that we would rather buy. We have also defined zero-distance product, which zero-distance trading is a kind of trade in which the product is both produced and sold within the same area. And finally, fair trade is the last definition. Fair trade is a trading partnership based on dialogue, transparency, and respectability that seeks greater equity in international trade. Fair trade basically contributes to sustainable development by offering better trading conditions to and securing the rights of marginalized producers and workers. This is also obviously from the International Fair Trade Charter of 2018. So, why should we choose fair trade? Because by choosing fair trade, people can create change through their everyday interactions, because obviously buying a fair trade product is very easy actually, you just need to go to the shop and buy it. A product with a fair trade mark, which is how fair trade works, you have to get a mark from bypassing through various strict regulations. A fair trade mark means producers and businesses have met internationally agreed upon standards, which are obviously stated by Fair Trade Association. So now for our team line. Our team line is that we prefer fair trade over zero distance products because we believe that through choosing fair trade, consumers can demand the highest standards from businesses, government, and while also ensuring the people and the planet, that people and planet are not exploited to create the products that we enjoy, and that fair trade allows us to get access to. Now I will tell you what me and the other speakers of my team will do. I, as the first speaker, will talk about how fair trade is ethical, while instead zero-distance products are morally neutral. The second speaker, I will also give you various examples about child labor and worker exploitation. The second speaker will tell you about the environment and why fair trade is to be considered sustainable. And finally, the last speaker will refute the points of the opposition team and also will talk about the positive outcomes of a fair trade society, in particular regarding the economic aspect. So, having said that, I would like to get to my point. My point is that, as I've stated before, since fair trade respects various workers' rights and refutes child labor, as I will tell you moving on in the debate, it is ethical, while instead zero distance is morally neutral, because it only guarantees you where the products come from. It does not guarantee you how it is produced, or who produces it, or in the conditions in which it is produced. According to the Fair Trade Association, common human rights violation in the agricultural field and supply chain include low incomes to keep the farmers and the workers overall poor, child labor, discrimination against women who are underrepresented in the higher position and in the management positions, but are overrepresented in the lower paying jobs, and finally health and safety hazards, like the various agrochemicals. Obviously, fair trade mitigates all of these problems because it associates with the companies to raise awareness and by applying the strict regulations that I have talked about before. But actually, you may ask, what are these strict regulations? Well, for example, let's take the example of child labor. 160 million children are under child labor according to UNICEF, and 70% of them work in agriculture. Of course, fair trade solves this by, as I've said before, with the strict regulation that they impose. Additionally, in the opposite case, so by abusing workers' rights, there are various cases all around the world of products that maybe, yeah, they are zero distance, but they are created with the exploitment of the workers. So, for example, let's take a very close example to us actually. Let's take, for example, southern Italy, in particular the provinces of Latina and Caserta. In these two provinces, immigrants are basically immigrants are abused in the sense that they are paid extremely low wages for the work that they do, and they produce food in the industry of agriculture. And obviously fair trade prevents this, first of all, by applying a minimum wage, which in Italy is...
Point of information.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Are you aware that fair trade mainly operates with farmers in third world countries and not in first world countries like Italy?
Yeah, I know that, but first of all, fair trade could expand and come to Italy also in the future, because it is still expanding, and I'm sure that in the future fair trade will come to countries like Italy too. And second of all, Italy was just an example. This was a case in a first world country, but there are many, many more cases in third world countries of children and workers overall being exploited. Moving on with my discussion. Many of these children, as I said before, with child labor, have no time, for example, to go to school or for leisure, and obviously this is hurtful to them and to their development. Fair trade obviously fights these problems because, for example, children under 15 cannot be employed in fair trade companies. Kids under the age of 18 cannot work except for only family businesses and under extremely strict regulations again. So, by purchasing fair trade products, as I stated before, you help fighting against these evils, and it is also pretty easy to do because you just need to go to the shop and look for the trademark and just buy the product. So, fair trade follows also the conventions of the ILO, which is the International Labour Association, regarding workers' rights. What does this mean? This means that, as I stated before, fair trade is morally correct. It is moral, while instead zero distance is overall morally neutral, because fair trade obviously guarantees you the respect of all of these rights, human rights, workers' rights, and rights about, for example, child labor, as I stated before. So I've shown you how fair trade is moral, while the second speaker will show you how fair trade also helps the environment, and the third speaker will tell you about the various economic benefits that we gain from a fair trade society. Overall, I will repeat to you our teamline. We prefer fair trade over zero distance because we believe that through choosing the fair trade products, consumer can demand the highest standards of living, the highest standards from businesses and governments, while also guaranteeing us that the products that we consume are produced in a safe and respectful of the workers' rights way. So thank you for your attention. My speech here is done.
Thank you very much. 7 minutes. Ready? Okay. Go ahead, please.
Is it?
Yes.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Inglese, and today I'll be the first speaker for side opposition. My team will bring forward 3 arguments in favor of local economy and zero-distance products over fair-trade products. But before we get to that, I would like to offer some rebuttal to what the first speaker of side proposition just said. So, first of all, well, basically, the 2 main arguments of side proposition were about the social conditions that fair trade can assure to the workers and farmers, especially children and women, and secondly, about the environment impact. So, about the working condition and wages that are assured to the workers and farmers in developing countries like fair trade organizations, well, who said, first of all, that zero-distance production now always exploit their farmers or their workers? You gave an example, yeah, in South Italy. However, we also have examples about exploitation from fair trade organizations with their workers. First of all, in 2006, the Financial Times did a survey of fair trade certified farmers in Peru and found 80% still received incomes below the minimum wage, which means that even if the fair trade organization assure their workers the fair wages, well, they did not in this case. However, we also have another example. For example, fair trade does not assure that, for instance, a report by SOAS, University of London, about fair trade in Uganda and Ethiopia, found that wages in fair trade certified markets were very low. So, actually, fair trade does not always assure their workers fair wages. And also, even if these certifications, as you said, assure their workers this fair treatment, actually, how do you know that after this certification, probably they will little by little lose this incentive to keep on investing in improving efficiency and working conditions? Furthermore, you talk about children. Wait, just a second, I just want to finish my point. First of all, you talked about children. Of course, in developing countries, children could be still exploited. However, there are some cases, and actually a lot of cases, where families need their children to work because they don't have money and they need more arms, we can say, in legs and to work because they do not have money. And if we just we're going to take these children away from their work conditions, well, this will have a negative impact on the life and the conditions of the family itself. I will take you now.
You do know that even if it prevents child exploitation, fair trade does not stop only to that. It also gives, as I stated before, a fair wage to the workers.
Yeah, I know that, and it is true. Of course, fair trade organizations want to follow this goal. However, there are cases, as I showed you before, where these farmers are not fairly treated, so your point could be true. However, the reality is not always the same. It is not always as it is shown by fair trade organizations. And then also about women contribution. It is important, however, there are still few cooperatives, fair trade cooperatives that employ women in their communities, in their work. And finally, about the environment, it is true that 0 kilometer products do not have certifications. However, these zero distance products, and you didn't specify that in your definition, is that they mostly be produced ecologically and organically. So at least we try, 0 kilometer products try to produce organic products mostly. But now I would like to move to my first and second argument. First of all, I want to introduce my team. First of all, I will introduce an overview of why a local economy is much better than a local economy is much better than a global economy. Secondly, I will delve more into how positive zero distance production can be on the social and economic point of view of a local community. And furthermore, my teammate Mariano will delve more into the third argument, which is how important it is to educate children through the local economy. So first of all, about my first argument, the global market versus local market. The global market is fluid and can be very fragile. In fact, we've seen it with the coronavirus and with the war. For example, these two countries that now are important for this war, Ukraine and Russia. The global market has been heavily supplied by these two countries, accounting for a total of 27% in the wheat sector and 15% in that of maize, with Russia also being the second main provider for natural gas in the world. And that's not all, there are also a lot of countries that rely on China for many goods. That means that the pandemic and the war especially have crippled the value chain of production and import-export in a very unprecedented way, and there will be inevitable and following economic downturn because of this over-reliance on overseas production. Then a local market, why is it better? Because it has benefits. First of all, it does not have to rely on global market. And therefore, it is more stable. Then the global market, anyway, we do want to, no thank you, we do want to underline that we prefer zero-distance products, but we absolutely also support fair trade whenever it would not be possible to grow the products in question because of climate and soil conditions. Then another benefit of a local market is this short supply chain that will result in quicker delivery in smaller volumes, and it will also lead to cheaper prices for the customers as there are fewer or even no intermediaries. And then I would like to move into my second argument. So how local production and sale of products can be very beneficial for the local community from both a social and economic point of view. First of all, it strengthens the local economy by, giving more money that will be spent locally, and this will lead to more income generated for the community. And then there will also be a higher amount of job creation locally, which leads to higher wages for the community, and also much better living conditions, of course, in the local community. Moreover, by producing locally, there is more control of every single phase of the production, which means that we can use and even profit from these byproducts resulting from it. And furthermore, food byproducts can be also transformed through technologies and innovations into a broad areas such as fertilizer, medicine, and bioenergy. And finally, we want also to add that the circular economy would have been beneficial from both economic point of view and social point of view, because it will bring people together and it will also contribute to local causes. For all these reasons, I encourage you to stand up for proposition side, since it assures better local economy from both a social and economic point of view in contrast to a global market. Thank you, I have finished.
Thank you very much. 8 minutes and 35 seconds. Second speaker, whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me? My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Letizia and I'm the second speaker of the proposition team. As the proposition team, we stand for the following motion, which is this House prefers fair trade products over zero-distance products. I'd like to remind our team line, which is we stand for fair trade products because we believe that the consumers this way can ask for the best products, the highest standards products, while making sure that the people and the planet are not exploited to create such products. Before starting my arguments, I'd like to refute some of the things said by the first speaker of the opposition team. First of all, they brought some allegations in regards to people being actually exploited and how fair trade is a flawed system. Well, I'd like to point out that there is an independent and outside company called Flowcert that has the role to make sure that within this fair trade system, and I quote, Flowcert supports businesses by making sure supply chains are built on fair practices and guiding ethical procedures, traders, and brands. This means that there is an independent outside company that makes sure that everything that occurs within this fair trade system is actually ethical. Now I'd like to ask you a question. Is there a company, is there an entity that does this for zero-distance production? We don't believe so. And then,
point of information.
No, thank you. And then you also claimed that zero-distance is certified to be producing products ecologically without giving us a source for that, meaning that you didn't exactly specify how this is certified. And then you said also that some families in poorer countries, they need children to keep working. Well, with the fair trade system, we can actually help these families to make sure that children can have time to be children, while their families can earn more money, and the children are not forced to work, being also underage, which is illegal. Having said that, I'd like to begin with my arguments with a quotation from the IPCC of 2014 that stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from 2014. And I quote, "We don't need to produce 50% more food to feed an expected 9.1 billion people by in 2050. Global food production must increase in real terms by 75% to provide enough food for human survival." Having said this, it's clear that our global population keeps growing, and with that, demand for food. But in these circumstances, global warming, we must protect our planet. And I'll show you right now what fair trade does to undergo these conditions, so protecting our planet, while also keeping an ideal balance between demand and production. Climate justice is at the heart of fair trade's purpose, meaning that they are extremely aware of what production and transport entails. This is why they have a strict protocol that they follow in order to reduce as much as possible their emissions and carbon footprint throughout production and transportation and export. What fair trade does is they support and finance farming techniques that preserve our environment, or better, local ecosystems. These farming techniques are specific to different areas of the world, meaning that each farmer living in a specific area of the world knows how to farm, how to produce products being in the most sustainable way. Part of the fair trade policy is, I quote, "To sell fair trade products, farmers have to improve soil and water quality, manage pests, avoid using harmful chemicals, manage waste, reduce their greenhouse gas emission, and protect biodiversity." This means that fair trade sets some standards which, if not met, do not allow production. You may ask, how do they achieve this? How is this guaranteed? Well, the organization spends time training farmers based on their local environment, teaching farmers how to grow produce in a sustainable way in harmony with their surroundings, preserving their surrounding ecosystem. So being a part of fair trade means that a farmer in a poorer country is better aware of the environmental issues and what these environmental issues, the impact of these environmental issues, both on the crops that they grow and on their lives. By doing so, fair trade also contributes to some points of the Sustainable Development Goals listed by the UN, such as number 1, no poverty, number 8, decent work and economic growth, number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Why? Because production occurs in poor countries, helping them to fight poverty and assuring them human rights, as the first speaker has already demonstrated. Secondly, number 15, life on land. This means that obviously they preserve the single ecosystems present in the world. Number 13, obviously, climate action. Production is aimed to reduce greenhouse emissions as much as possible. This as well with number 12, responsible consumption and production. I'd like to end now on a note about carbon footprint. Obviously, carbon emission is still a concern for fair trade, because obviously once production occurs, these products must be exported. The problem with this is that obviously fair trade doesn't have sorry, I can't think of a word. Their job, let's put it this way, it's not to produce the technology available to export these products in the most sustainable way. They just use, obviously, the technology that is available. So if that is planes, cargo ships, or trains, that is just what is available. Of course, in the moment in which a more sustainable way to export these products will be available, fair trade will use those ways. The best they can do is to reduce to a minimum their environmental impact, so greenhouse emission, during production. I'd like to point out that a study published in 2008 at UN has found that the vast majority, about 83%, of food-related emissions are associated with the production phase rather than the transportation phase. Obviously, I've already pointed out how fair trade tackles this problem by training their farmers to, and I quote again, I'd like to quote again their policy, trains their farmers to improve soil and water quality, manage pests, avoid using harmful chemicals, manage waste, reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and protect biodiversity. Having said this, I'd like also to remind you that the organization's main purpose is to fight against exploitation and poverty linked to economic, political, and social causes. That is all I have to tell you, and I am done with my speech.
Thank you very much. 7 minutes and 23. 7:23. Whenever you're ready.
My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Now, the population of the whole world is constantly growing, and with it is demand for food. The problem with that is that young people are finding it harder and harder to connect with the agricultural sector and try and find a job in that area. And in order to solve this, we believe that focusing on the local economy, thanks to zero-kilometer products, will be able to help solve this issue and thus help fight world hunger. This is something that I'm going to talk about in my speech, and so in our third argument for side opposition of the House. However, before I get to that, I would like to rebut some of the things that have been said so far by side proposition. Now, they've made many claims and many rebuttals to what we have been said, so I'm just going to start with one of the rebuttals that they did to our definition of zero-kilometer products. So we argued that zero-kilometer products are mostly produced in organic ways, which is a statistical fact that has been proven. Now, the proposition side has questioned this by saying that we never really provided a reason why that's the case. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So there is actually a strong reason why zero-kilometer products tend to be more organic and genuine than fair trade products. And this is because if we're buying a local product, a zero-kilometer product, it means that we are buying from a small farmer that is getting their whole income from whatever they sell. This means that they have an incentive, an active incentive, to make their food the best that they can and the most appealing to consumers. And in a day where we are questioning our ethical impact on the world, more consumers are trying to find bioethical products that are produced in genuine ways, and therefore it means that most farmers that rely on their zero-kilometer products to sustain themselves have an incentive, an active incentive, to make their products genuine. Whereas in fair trade, farmers are simply paid for their association to fair trade, and not necessarily the quality of the food they produce. The only reason why they might want to produce food that is of a certain quality is to get the certification in the first place. Then, after they get the certification, they have very little incentive to actually keep on improving the quality of their food and keep on producing, just a second, and keep on producing genuine food. I'll take your POI now.
Alright, so what I wanted to ask is, you're talking about the quality side of the definition, but what about the ethical side? Because in the definition, zero distance does not include ethics.
I'll get to ethics in just a little bit. Well, since you brought it up, I'm going to talk about the ethical side. So, for the ethical dilemma, the side proposition stated that fair trade actually wants to fight against the exploitation of workers, against child labor, and against the lack of representation of women in the industry. However, we believe that fair trade is, first of all, not doing enough in that regard. Because as we've stated with a few examples, there have been some serious cases in which the rights of the workers working in fair trade cooperatives were not respected. But also, we want to argue that even on our side of the house, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is going to be that exploitation of the workers. As a matter of fact, they actually responded to something that we said that was similar to this by saying that in fair trade there is an outside company that is making sure that all of their practices and all of their principles are being respected. Whereas in the case of zero-kilometer products, that's not the case. Now, we believe that that response is actually flawed for a couple of reasons. First of all, even if there is an outside company that is making sure that, that is in theory making sure that the principles of fair trade are being respected, if examples show that that's not the case, then it means that the outside company is not working properly, and therefore that the principles of fair trade are not truly being respected, at least not in every case. And then we want to argue that there is some sort of way to make sure that there is no exploitation of the workers, even in zero-kilometer products. And this is simply the government. If we're talking about zero-kilometer products, we're talking about the products that are being produced in a nation, sold by that same nation. This means that, just a second, this means that the government can realize what the best laws are to implement in that country to make sure that they have the right balance between the exploitation of workers being fought and actually giving producers the right freedom that they need when they're producing their products. And it can enforce it through inspectors and the police. I will now take your POI.
Do you not believe that if the governments work as you intended, so by protecting the workers, fair trade will not even be needed, but it exists? So what about that?
Well, we understand that obviously the governments cannot make sure that the rights of the workers are being respected in every single situation. But what we want to make very clear is that that's not happening on your side of the house either. So what we want to say is that the exploitation of workers happens on both your side of the house and our side of the house, and we are both trying to fight it in some way. We're never going to be able to completely remove it from the whole world, but we don't believe that your side of the house is necessarily better in that regard. I will now get to my argument. So to introduce the third and final argument for today, I want to tell you that the zero-distance products can have a greatly beneficial effect on the well-being and the education of children of the local community. An economy that is based mostly on zero-distance products can highly help in their education in order to help them develop a better understanding of healthy food and the importance of a balanced nutrition. Let me make myself more clear by providing a significant example. In Galicia, the first school canteen that was based entirely on kilometer zero products was born since the school administration has developed school meals based on almost 100% fresh local products. Why do you judge, as we mentioned, in the school project? Well, this is because often the management of school canteens is based on catering services with food that is traveling hundreds of miles before being prepared for consumption. This kind of food presents many problems because of the numerous antibiotics contained in meat, the artificial feed used to fatten cattle, and the widespread use of pesticides, just to mention a few. And all of these affects our health, and in particular, one of the children with undeveloped immune systems. As a matter of fact, the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, is warning us that by 2050, there will be more death from antibiotic resistance than from cancer. This is largely attributed to the use of drugs in industrial agriculture. The above-mentioned project in Galicia allows children to learn about the social, environmental, and cultural importance of their food, providing them with a healthy diet. But this is not all. As we stated, we believe that a local economy can help provide key jobs that are slowly being forgotten, such as being able to work in agriculture. As we stated, the FAO report, an FAO report says that by 2050 there will be 1.3 billion 15 to 24-year-olds that are going to have to be introduced in the agricultural sector to meet the growing food demand in the world. However, in the status quo, people are finding it hard to enter the field of agriculture because there is not a lot of information and a lot of incentives to go in that route. And we believe that by favoring local products, this is going to help make sure that children are more, that the agricultural field is more appealing to children in the future. Because of that, we believe that we should stand for zero-kilometer products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 8 minutes and 30 seconds. 8 minutes and 30 seconds.
start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lorenzo Delvecchio, and before I start, I bring up my point in my speech, I would like to refute many of the points brought up by the opposition team. First of all, I would like to start with one of the last points brought up by the second speaker regarding to pesticides and other chemicals. As the second speaker has stated, even the first speaker, fair trade trains farmers to use less of these chemicals and be more safe and have a higher quality in regards to these chemicals, using less pesticides and fertilizers and such, also to preserve the environment. And also, another point I would like to bring up is that the second speaker specifically brought up the idea of antibiotics being used in animals. But here's the thing we have to take into account. That is also included in zero distance. First of all, as I just said, in fair trade, the definition of fair trade includes the fact that we try to diminish the use of these chemicals to preserve the environment and increase the quality of our products, while zero distance in its definition does not. So trying to say that we use them is not only incorrect by the definition, but they, again, in their definition, don't state that they don't use them. So again, I would like to ask them, if you tell us about this, shouldn't also we be telling you that antibiotics are used in your products as well? And secondly, another point that was brought up a lot between the first and second speaker was in regards to examples of exploitation. First of all, I would like to talk about how we brought up a concrete example of how a company, an independent company, controls or rather investigates and makes sure that farmers are not exploited. And first of all, the example that they brought up was a very old example. It was in 2006. It was a long time ago, and they did not bring up any more recent examples. So this necessarily means that either they do not have it, or that in time the examples of exploitation has gotten much better and better, and so it has not popped up again. And continuing with this, they talked about how in zero distance, the government can inspect their farmers and industries to make sure that workers are not exploited. First of all, I would like to say how they brought up a more hypothetical example. They said the government can do it. They didn't bring up a concrete example, while we did. We talked about a concrete company. Yes?
Are you aware that governments actually put inspectors in farms every now and then
yes.
to check on this?
And in regards to that, continuing with that point, even if we take that into account, we also have to take into account that on our side we have the independent company inspecting fair trade farms, and the governments, the local governments, also doing it as well. So you can say that there is more inspection on our side compared to yours. Also, the opposition team, as I was saying in regards to exploitation, brought up an older example from 2006, while my team brought up a much more recent example, which I would like to go into more detail, in regards to migrants in specifically Italy, but this can also be applied to other countries. In Italy, as Amnesty International states, migrants, around 500,000 of them, are being exploited in the agricultural sector mainly, and on average they receive 40% less pay than the minimum pay for Italians, and they also work many more hours. And also we have to take into account that this pay is not even necessarily secure, because in many cases, for example, there was one case with a single worker who was supposed to receive around 500 euros a month. Instead, the contractor, the business owner, during the last months only paid him 100 euros a month. And so not only are their pays less in general, but they're also insecure, because the contractor can just diminish it when they want. And continuing, they also, the opposition team again also talked about how zero distance products are produced ecologically and biologically. First of all, in the definition, this is not necessary. The definition of zero distance does not include this, while the definition of fair trade does. As I've stated before, it includes the fact that we want to use less chemicals and to preserve the environment and the local ecosystems. And secondly, continuing on this, again, the definition of zero distance is morally neutral compared to fair trade. Yes, there have been some examples of exploitation in fair trade, but again, it is older examples, and again, there have also been examples, recent examples, may I point out, in local trade or zero distance trade. And with that, I'd like to finally get to my point, which is in regards to the economic factors. Otherwise, I'd like to bring up the point of competition. First of all, if we take into account local trade versus fair trade, zero distance trade versus fair trade, we have to take into account that in zero distance trade, there is a lot less competition compared to fair trade due to the fact that you have less sources to buy products from. And again, bringing up what the White House has stated, using a quote, in an economy without adequate competition, prices and corporate profits rise while workers' wages decrease. This means large corporations and their shareholders gain wealth while consumers and workers pay the cost. And again, when there is insufficient competition, dominant firms can use their market power to charge higher prices, offer decreased quality, and block potential competitors from entering the market, meaning entrepreneurs and small businesses cannot participate on a level playing field, and new ideas cannot become new goods and services. Specifically, I'd like to point out how the second speaker of the opposition team talked a lot about how small farmers want to make sure that their products are of high quality. But again, I'd like to not answer. So, first of all, I'd like to point out that in the definition of zero distance, there is no guarantee of competition or of the like. So, talking about small farmers is not necessarily the only factor we have to take into account. On the other hand, in fair trade, a part of the definition states, fair trade is a trading partnership that seeks greater equity in international trade. It contributes to sustainable development by offering better trading conditions to and securing the rights of marginalized producers, also workers, but I'd like to focus on the producers aspect of this. This means that fair trade offers an equal playing field where smaller producers can get into competition with bigger producers. And as we know, even as the White House states, basic economic theory demonstrates that when firms have to compete for customers, it leads to lower prices, higher quality goods and services, greater variety, and more innovation. And this is not only good for consumers, because again, prices and quality, but it is also great for workers because, again, as the White House states, competition is critical not only in product markets, but also in labor markets. When firms compete to attract workers, they must increase compensation and improve working conditions. This means that fair trade, unlike zero distance, not only, again, going back to what I said earlier, states that there will be less chemicals, there will be less polluting of the environment and such. Fair trade also assures ethics, and while zero distance does not, and also assures competition, which is good for consumers due to the product either being less expensive or being of higher quality, and for workers because the companies will have to be in competition to acquire the workers, and so the workers will be paid more or have better working conditions due to the companies having to fight over them and try to attract them. And with that, I'd like to conclude my speech.
Thank you very much. 8 minutes and 3 seconds.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1, now. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed judges, thank you for the floor. I will be the third speaker for side opposition in this debate. Now, I would like to start my speech by offering some rebuttal to what has been said by side proposition so far, and then I would like to get to the main points of clash in this debate, arguing to why we think that our model is better. Now, I would like to start by arguing to what they said about morally neutral in the aspect of zero-distance products. Now, they have stated that fair trade is morally better, meanwhile, local production is morally neutral. Now, as we stated previously in our rebuttals, not always morality is something that everyone can think of. Many times, especially in third world countries, morality is essentially a privilege. As we stated before, many families in poor countries are forced to make their children work. And that is because most likely because, just a second, most likely because of the poor condition of the family, or also because of the terrible living conditions that may have rendered the parents sick, unable to work, or just way too frail for their maybe too young age. And for all of these reasons, the children need to work to sustain their family. And if we strip them of this, and the parents are completely unable to work, how would that, what would fair trade help these families? It's impossible. If the parents cannot work, then fair trade cannot help them. Meanwhile, they don't have the privilege of being able to think about the morality of making the children work because they don't have the economic possibility to. I will take your POI.
All right, so I wanted to ask, as we stated, fair trade states that we will increase wages, so this will not be a problem. So are you supporting child labor in this case? Because as we've stated, that fair trade will pay the parents more, so it's not necessary.
In many cases, the parents have been exploited their entire life up to now, and we have shown evidence that fair trade doesn't always do this. And most likely the parents aren't in the condition to work anyways, or are not part of the cooperatives that fair trade actually helps, so they are excluded by fair trade. And I'm not supporting child labor, I'm simply stating the facts of the harsh world we live in. We cannot act like child labor doesn't exist, and that these conditions that these families live in don't exist. This is just simply impossible to say that it doesn't exist and that we can just erase it. No, just a second. Then they've said that the local market has less sources. As we stated previously, again, we said that fair trade would not be completely excluded in our point of view. Fair trade can still help whenever products can't be produced because of the climate or the soil, and we've said that in this case, fair trade could help in the market. And we could also argue that the fair trade pool of products isn't as large as the proposition seems to make it to be. Finally, they got to the point of small big competition by offering the example of a speech, of a statement made by the White House. They said essentially that in this statement, no, thank you. In this statement, small big competition between businesses, as well as the fact that this helps small businesses grow. They've also said that this encourages small businesses to be more eco-friendly, to become better, and to improve their own standards. Now, we believe that this statement is completely in favor of local production, as local production encourages, no thank you, encourages the small big competition, and in our argument about how smaller businesses and local businesses are more eco-friendly because they have to maintain a high standard for this market in which they have to compete against bigger corporations, is actually being accepted by the proposition, because in the White House statement it says exactly that. They are improving and being more ecological because of this competition that the local market would greatly improve. I will take your POIs now.
Can you explain how your model then helps with child labor?
Our model helps with child labor because, as I've said, by increasing this competition, especially locally, thanks to zero-kilometer products, they will improve themselves and their standards, as the White House example that you brought said. And this way, they will be incentivized to not exploit any workers, to not make children have child labor. And as we've also said previously, there's also governments that ensure this. And you brought forward the example of a single corporation that is outside of fair trade that apparently is able to check all of the companies and cooperatives, no thank you, that are inside of the fair trade label and make sure that they are not exploiting the workers. Now this is impossible to do for one company globally, while the government, being local, can check the local and make sure that this is happening. Now I would like to get to the main points of clash of this debate. Morality and ethics was the first. They said that fair trade offers higher rates and higher wages for all of their workers. Now we have brought example as to why this doesn't always happen, and we believe that the one corporation that is supposed to check that this happens is not enough to ensure that this is actually happening. Then they've said that child labor will be abolished, and as I've said previously, and my team has said previously, oftentimes this is not something that the families can afford to be stripped away from them. It is the harsh reality of the world. Morality is important for families, they've said, but we think that morality is a privilege, especially a privilege that is limited to richer families. And we believe also that the government can check and help these families, no thank you, way more than fair trade ever could, and for this reason, local would be still better than fair trade. Then, the second big point of clash in this debate was the climate and the environment. They said that fair trade is the better option. However, they contradicted themselves by bringing forward an example that clearly proves how a local market will increase small-big competition, therefore bringing people and smaller businesses to be incentivized to improve on their quality, improve on their standards, and improve on their sustainability. And we think that this is a much better incentive than what fair trade offers, as fair trade offers a trademark for meeting these standards. We think that the local market brings a much better, much more constant incentive that will surely help businesses be more environmentally friendly and have better work ethics. For all of these reasons, we believe that in all of these points of clash, the model of preferring local production has shown to be the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 8 minutes and 2 seconds. Ready? Ready? Okay, we can pass to reply speeches. Opposition team, you start first.
Thank you. My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1, now. Good morning, everyone. I'm Emanuele Cozzi doing the reply speech for side opposition. We have finally come to the end of this debate, and I would like to thank the proposition side for the great discussion that we've had today. However, coming to the reply speech that I will be doing now, I believe that there were ultimately some points that would have to give the win to side opposition. And in order to highlight why I believe that, I'm going to go on an analysis of the main points of clash on this debate and how each side of the house would impact on those points. I will start with the most important one, or at least the one that I believe is the most important, which is the point of competition. I believe this is the most important because I believe that it is the first point that can actually bring up the discussion for the other points of clash. So, the proposition side argued that their side of the house would have a bigger impact on competition because of fair trade. However, as we've been able to show, the free market that is available in an economy that is based on local products from local companies is actually a lot more encouraging to competition, since farmers are actually, and producers are actually competing against one another directly instead of giving all of their products to a single globalized company that is then reselling it to the whole world, as we stated in our first speech. So, because of that, we believe that the competition will actually be higher on our side of the house. We will have a much better impact when it comes to competition, and because of that, since both sides agreed that having a higher degree of competition will improve various other conditions, such as the ethical conditions and the climate conditions in general, which we'll get to in just a second. We believe that this point is also very much prevalent on our side of the house, and it's a great point to stand on to talk about the other points of clash. So, the other points of clash being mainly the morality and ethics and climate change, and how we can fight it. So, talking about the morality and ethics, once the propositional side argued that thanks to the principles of fair trade, there will be a great impact improving the moral situation in general when it comes to products in the global market. we believe that that's not necessarily exclusive to their side, and whilst they will surely have an impact on that, they cannot ensure that this principle of fair trade will always be respected, just like we unfortunately cannot always ensure it on our side of the house. Therefore, we believe that in this case, there isn't necessarily one that can be preferred, whether it be fair trade or 0 kilometers, and we should instead value both, as we've also stated in our model and definition, in which we state that whilst we generally prefer local products and 0 kilometer products, we still do not go against fair trade and still support it when it is possible and beneficial. So this point is available on both sides of the house, and both sides of the house will still have some sort of impact in this regard. Then coming to the point of climate change. Now, to talk about this point, I think we can stand on the shoulders of the point of competition. So as both sides agree, competition will make sure that that farmers and producers will improve their practices in order to appeal more to customers and be able to sell their products more for higher prices, and therefore will also improve their practices in regards to helping fight climate change, as that is perceived as appealing to the customers of the world of today. Now, because our side of the house actually has a much bigger impact when it comes to the point of competition, we believe that we will actually have also a bigger impact on the point of fighting climate change, because since there is more competition on our side, then it means that more farmers will be incentivized to improve their practices and become more eco-friendly in order to appeal to the market, all because of the point of competition. Therefore, we believe that we will have a higher impact also in this regard. Ultimately, those are the points that I think favor side of position in this debate, and that is the end of my speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1 minute and 49 seconds.
When you are ready.
Okay, you ready? Sarah, you ready? Ready?
Okay.
Okay, we can conclude with your last revised speech.
My speech is starting in 3, 2, 1, and go. Hello everybody. For the last and final time of this national championship, guess what? I'm back, and this time I'm doing the reply for the proposition team. So, I will start by analyzing the various clashing points that we have found during this debate. Then I will tell you who are the stakeholders during the debate and why they all benefit from our model more than opposition's model. And finally, I will tell you, as I stated before, why we have won on all the clashing points, thanks to our arguments and thanks to our rebuttals. So, starting first of all with the clashing points. I have found 3 main clashing points. The first one is human rights. So, first of all, opposition has stated that zero distance is morally, as also stated with their last speech, that zero distance is morally neutral, while fair trade, as we've stated many and many times, helps workers by increasing wages. And it also helps to eradicate the problem that is child labor, as we've stated before. Instead, when we asked them our question, they did not actually give us a real solution to child labor in their model. So, fair trade, as we stated many times, guarantees the respect of human rights, something which sometimes happens under zero distance, but not all the times, because as we stated before, it is in the definition of fair trade, while it is not in the definition of zero distance. So, and we have also provided you various examples, such as the one in Italy, according to Amnesty International, of course. It also, as the second speaker stated, helps us achieving the UN goals. And finally, as the third speaker has said, fair trade is monitored both by the state and the private sector. So, obviously, both of these players contribute to decreasing the infractions of human rights. So, the second clashing point was the environment. As the second speaker has demonstrated, the cost for transport is not nearly as expensive as the ecological damage that happens during production, and fair trade prevents this because, as we've stated many and many times, fair trade imposes strict regulations upon the production chain. And so the opposition instead does not really rebut any valid rebuttal against these points because they have not provided that. So the final clashing points was competition. Fair trade, as the third speaker stated with his argument, offers a level playing field for healthy and fair competition for both large and smaller companies, and guaranteing basically also the lowering of the prices, which obviously helps the consumer. So now let's take a look at the stakeholders, as I stated before. There are 4 stakeholders in this debate, which are the workers, which obviously have improved conditions thanks to improved wages, as we stated before, and also thanks to improved respect upon their human rights, which happens under fair trade, but it not necessarily happens under zero distance. The second stakeholder was the environment, and we have won also on this point because both the second and the third speaker have proved that it really is not the cost upon the ecological damage of transportation is not nearly as much as the one caused by the supply chain, and fair trade prevents this, as we stated before. Finally, the last 2 are the market, which is healthier thanks to healthy competition, as we stated before, and the consumer, which is also healthy because the competition helps lowering prices, and obviously this is a benefit for the consumer because he has cheaper product. So these are the reasons why we think that we have won with this debate, and we want to thank opposition for this beautiful final debate. So thank you very much, and thank you, judges.